With that, man, I will tell you, it's an honor and a privilege to introduce Scott. Come on up.
Rick, I appreciate that. I thought he was introducing the other Scott for a second, but thank you. Appreciate that. Those are some kind words, some very kind words. Thank you. I want to go back to the training on the 29th. A lot of times we get faced with a lot of different questions. I don't know about you, but when I first started, I had tons of questions. What's okay? What's not okay? One of the big things back when I was starting was the guidelines. There was this guideline of no crosstalk. And the crosstalk was if somebody was crying, you could not hand them a Kleenex because that would interrupt the group and interrupt them from crying. And they've got that ugly cry face going that nobody wants to see, but we can't do anything because there's no crosstalk. And so there's those questions that you may have is, can I give them a Kleenex? Can I not? What's the deal? And so we're going to have a training that day, and it's going to start at 9 a.m. and go to about 11:30. And it's just going to be an opportunity for us to talk about better practices versus what are the rules of Celebrate Recovery. And so what's the DNA of it and what is better practices? And so I encourage you, if you're attending, if you're serving, if you're doing whatever, be here that morning, and we'll have a great opportunity for that. So it'll be a good time. I remember... Let me introduce myself first. I'm Scott. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I'm in recovery from sex addiction and compulsive overeating. Hey, I remember exactly where I was at this moment. I was a youth pastor in Alaska. I was dead asleep, and the phone rang next to us. And my wife picks up the phone, and she does one of those, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh moments, right? And she goes, something has happened. We got to go turn on the news. So we are in a 3-level apartment. Our bedroom's in the top level. Our TV was in the bottom level. So we go like doing the stairs all the way down to the bottom. We get into the bottom, the basement, and we turn on the TV. And 17 years ago, there was the horror that was on the screen. The reality was hitting that our country was under attack. And there was a lot of people 17 years ago that lost their life. And so I just want to take this opportunity to remember that day and for us to just take a moment of silence for us to privately pray, however you decide that you want to pray for that moment. And then after a moment or so, I'll close that time, and then we'll get on with our lesson for tonight. So go ahead and feel free to pray. Lord, there were so many that day that lost their life. They lost their life in this tragic accident where our country was attacked by terrorists. And Lord, there are so many that stepped up to the occasion to help and to serve and to try to save those that were hurt, those that were dying, those that were struggling. Our country came together and was able to try to salvage anything out of this. And so we take this moment to remember those that have lost their lives, those that gave their lives for this country, and even the military that since then has continued to wage this war on terrorism. Lord, thank you for your hand of protection upon us. It could have been so much worse. Lord, I ask that through our serving of you, through the way that we carry ourselves, through the way that we honor our country and the way we honor you, that you get all that glory and all that honor. Lord, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Wow, there we go. So here's the deal. Today we're talking about cleaning up our side of the street. We're cleaning up our side of the street. So when we get into recovery, the reality is our life is messy. Part of the reason why a lot of us in this room get into recovery, because one day we open up our eyes and all of a sudden we realize our life is messy. The things around us are totally distraught and thrown all over the place. Our life is what we call unmanageable. We realize that I can't control anything. and I am going to lose my mind if something doesn't change. So we step into the rooms of recovery. We find ourselves wandering to find a church, to find someone to talk to. We find ourselves in a hospital with somebody talking to us. We find ourselves in prison with somebody talking to us. We find our places in so many different locations, and people and us going, our life is unmanageable. Well, today it's the opportunity to start cleaning up our side of the street. We can't deal with and we can't control the other people in our lives and what's messy in their life. What we can do is we can take all of our stuff together and we can start to make it all nice and neat. And that's what we've been doing through this process. And this is the process of us actually starting to clean out this from our life. See, the first step, we realized that we were in denial and we realized there was a mess that we actually had to clean up. Step 2 and 3, we realized that we could not clean it up on ourselves, that there was somebody out there that needed to help us, and that's God, and that when we surrender to God, he can help us clean this mess up. Then step 4, we actually start to make a list of all the things in our life that we have to clean up. We start making this list. We start writing it down. We start doing these things. And step 5, we start telling somebody else, ourselves, and God, our mess, our list. And we put them in boxes, and we've done this great thing, and it's all nice and orderly. And then we look at our character defects and go, wow, we're crazy. And that's true, we are. And so then we get to a point where we go, what do we do with this? See, what happens is a lot of us struggle with even doing the inventory and putting it in boxes. But then once we get in the boxes, we want to clean around it, we want to stack it in the corner, and we want to leave it. We're like, all right, that's good enough. I mean, I got it kind of contained until somebody comes along and they open up the box again. And they throw it and they make our life messy again. Because if we don't ever deal with this, it's only going to stay there and cause more hurt and pain. And so we go through the process of going, who do I need to forgive? Who do I need to make amends to? And last week, or 2 weeks ago, we heard a great lesson from Scott as he shared about forgiveness. And it's my belief that before we ever get to the step of amends, we have to have the foundation principle of forgiveness. Because if I ever go, me personally, if I ever go to somebody to make an amends and I have not already forgiven them, I go with an expectation, and that expectation is a resentment when I walk away and go, well, they were a jerk and they didn't whatever, right? And here's the thing. I need to make sure I've done that step. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but really tonight we're talking about amends. See, we want to say that they're going to go away, but they never do. We have to go through this step so we can remove them from our lives and get healing. This is where the miracle happens. You hear that statement, don't quit till the miracle happens. It's through this step that all of a sudden the miracle starts to happen in your life. Are you going to let the miracle happen? Don't quit before the miracle happens, and this is where it starts to happen. But there's 3 different types of amends, and we're going to talk about them real briefly, and then we're going to get into our acrostic. The first step of amends is this, or first type is the direct amends. I'm going to go directly to Art, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm sorry for this, this, and this. I was inappropriate. I was wrong. I should not have done this. And guess what? That's all I'm going to do. Now I'm going to be willing to, if he's got any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, he's willing to share that. And then I'm done. The other type of amends is indirect amends, right? Some of us in this room have had DUIs. Some of us in this room, we've been arrested. Some of us in this room, we can't really go back and make that direct amends. So we got to do an indirect amends by doing community service, by being on probation, by serving time in jail, by whatever it means to do that indirect amends, right? Then there's that living amends. This is where now not only am I going to say I'm sorry, but now I have to show you through my day-to-day life that my character is changing and I'm no longer going to go down that path that I used to go down. See, so many of us, we say, hey, I said I was sorry. Can't you get over it? But yet you're still acting and behaving the same way. It's the same story you've already told. You said you were going to stop drinking, but you're still drinking. You said you were going to stop cheating, but you're still cheating. You said you were going to stop looking at porn, but you're still looking at porn. You said you were going to stop gambling, but you're still gambling. You said you were going to stop eating, but you're still eating. You said you were going to stop yelling and screaming, but you're still yelling and screaming. This is where our lives have to come to a place where we can day by day show that the principles that we learn in this program are changing our life. Some of us may ask this question, but Scott, how can I ever make an amends? And you fill in the blank. I don't know what is. Some people, how can I ever make an amends for the fact that I murdered somebody? How can I ever make an amends for the fact that I molested somebody? How can I ever make an amends for the fact that I had an abortion? How can I ever make an amends for the fact that I slept with a prostitute? How can I ever make an amends that I gave HIV to my spouse? How can I ever make an amends for whatever it may be? And I don't know what that is for you. But some of us are at that point where we're asking that question, and this is what we're saying is if you go through this process and you start to clear out the boxes from your life, that is where the miracle happens. That is where you find healing and where you find forgiveness. It's huge. It's huge. And so we're going to start with this. Admit the hurt and the harm. It doesn't bring it all back up and say that it didn't hurt or it doesn't relive it. It's just you're admitting the fact that that hurt. You're admitting the fact that what is in this box here caused hurt and pain in your life. Or you caused hurt and pain to somebody else. That's simply what it's doing. It's just admitting that there is a hurt or a pain. That's all we're doing. We've already inventoried it, right? Those boxes are still here. We're just acknowledging that they're there. If we don't deal with them, then it hinders what God can actually do in our life. Because eventually we run out of space in our life of all the boxes. Because there's another stack of boxes here that I have to deal with, and then another stack here, and then another stack here. If I never get rid of these boxes, it just keeps piling up. And guess what? I'll run out of space. I'll run out of space. Luke chapter 6, verse 37 says this. It says, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. This opportunity to take a look at this and start to go through this process of cleaning up these boxes in our lives is huge. The second part of this is to make a list. To make a list and see if you turn your bulletin over on the back side of that sheet that you have, there's actually a piece of paper in there, the amends list. And some of you maybe need this today. Others of you, you've already gone through that fourth step and fifth step. And so you already have your inventory list and you already have all that dialed in, which is column 5, all the people you've harmed. Your part, right? All that list? Yeah, that's the list that you'd put on here. But who do you owe amends to? And then who do you need to forgive? That's the column 1, where the people that have hurt you, right? And that's how you'd start to fill that out. But it's that fourth step and that 8th step where we make this list. And here's the thing, don't worry about the how-tos yet. Don't worry about how am I going to do this? Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Just bear with me a minute. We'll get there eventually, okay? We'll get there eventually. Luke chapter 6, verse 31 says this, do to others as you would have them do to you. Would you not want somebody that has hurt you and harmed you to actually come back and say, hey, I'm sorry for this behavior. I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry I caused this hurt. I'm sorry I caused this pain. And then to go through that living amends if need be, or that direct amends, however that's played out in that situation you're wrestling with. Because I know I wish that would happen. And when that has happened in my life, and somebody has come back and made a good amends process with me, dude, it's so healing. And it's so awesome. So because I've been able to experience that, I want to do the same thing to others. And so that's why I start to go through this process. The next aspect of this is to encourage. To encourage one another. Remember, this is not a program to do alone. Hey, can't I buy those 4 workbooks and just go through them? Well, I guess you can, but you're not going to get the benefit of the program and what the purpose of it is, right? That's why we have step studies. That's why we have the step study 2 nights from now, Thursday night. That's why we're going to have a group of guys gathering together in a room to talk about these things. That's why we're going to have a group of gals gathering together to talk about these things. This is where we get our encouragement. We get the encouragement from our open share groups. I get the encouragement from my guys that are sitting in my compulsive overeaters group that's saying, hey, man, I can do it. I know it's tough. You don't have to go to eat all that extra food. You don't have to go do those things. You can do it, Scott. To get that encouragement from my guys that are in my sex addiction group, my accountability partners that I call on a regular basis, my accountability partners that when I'm struggling, I'm calling. When I'm not struggling, I'm still calling. I'm still staying in relationship. To my sponsor who I call and who guides me and directs me and helps me walk the steps. The guy who says, hey, Scott, have you 4th stepped that? I don't like that all the times. Don't like that. So before I used to do it alone, but now I have people that I have gathered around me to help me. The question is, who are the people that you've gathered around you to help encourage you and to spur you on to good deeds and good work, to do this work of recovery in your life? Always check your motives during this time, and this is where you bounce this off your accountability partners. What's my motives? Is my motive to go make amends with this person so that they will make an amends to me? Because if that is your motive, it's all wrong. It's all wrong, and you're going to walk away hurt and mad and resentful, and you've got another thing. You got a 4th step now, right? You laugh because you know it's happened, because it's happened in my life, right? It's that process that we have to go through. What's your motives behind this? Is your motives, okay, I'm just going to get this done and over with. And so you don't put a lot of thought in it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I was watching a TV show, and in this TV show, it's this drug addict who goes away to a program, 30-day program, and in the 30-day program, he's like on day 28. He goes to his sponsor from a NA program and goes, all right, hey, here's my amends list. I'm ready to do the amends. He's all, you did that in 28 days? That's crazy. It took me 9 months to be ready to do my amends list. And here's the thing, is he didn't do it right. Now, I'm not saying the time frame is I don't want to debate that. But the issue was, the show went on, it showed him go up to people and jack the whole thing up. Like, hey, I just want to say I'm sorry for this, and this. And the person was like, wow, I don't accept your apology. That was weird. And it was just interesting how the whole thing happened. And so you got to check your motives. Are you putting thought behind it? Are you sincere? Are you going through this process humbly? Or are you going through it just to get another checkbox taken care of? Because if you're just doing it for a checkbox, guess what? These boxes aren't going to disappear. They're going to stay there. You're not going to get them cleared from your life. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says this, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. If you've been around these rooms or as you're hanging around these rooms, may you be somebody that can spur one another on. May you be that person that can be a good accountability partner. That when you're called, that you're there not to judge or condemn, but to come alongside them and encourage them. To not shame them, but to love them. Not to condone them, but to help steer them and direct them. May you be that good person. May you be that good person that's able to sponsor somebody and help them walk this road. Making this list. Teaching them how to make amends. And the reason why you can teach them how to make amends is because you yourself have done amends correctly. You yourself have walked that road. Remember, as we go through this road, the N stands for not for them. This amends is not for them. It's not for the other person on the other half of the street. It's simply you cleaning up your side of the street. This is not for them. I'm not going to my mom to make an amends because my mom has asked me to make an amends. I'm going to my mom to make amends for me. I'm going to my wife to make amends for me. I'm going to my son, my daughter, my coworker, my whoever it is to make an amends for me. It's not about them. I know that sounds selfish. I know that sounds rude, but it is not about them. It's about you. Don't put the hurt on their side. Hey, I wanted to let you know I forgive you. Well, no, that's not how it works. When we forgive, that's a personal thing we do within ourselves, that we forgive them, because that's about us. When we go to make an amends, even though there was a mutual thing that happened, we don't say, hey, remember when you cheated on me? I just want you to know I'm sorry for the fact I cursed you out. Well, now it makes it all about them, and that's not a good thing to do. But you can say, hey, remember we had that situation about a month ago? I just want to make sure that I apologize for my part. I should not have whatever happened. Boom, 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 right? And we list it out. That was disrespectful, that was rude, that was whatever. We don't place the boxes on their half. They've got enough stuff to worry about. We need to clear off our side. No excuses or justifications. I coach football and I love football. So I was watching game film with my team yesterday, and I'm like, hey, what happened here? Coach, well, I thought I was supposed to do. Or, hey, I know my first step's supposed to be forward, but I thought I saw them going. No, stop with the excuses. What's going on? Don't excuse your behavior. Don't excuse your, hey, I was in a really bad mood, so therefore I did this. No. Don't justify, well, you did this, so therefore I did this. No. Simply own up to your part of it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about owning up to our part of the mistake. Something happened this last week that's really got me spun out. I was talking about it in my staff meeting earlier today with my boss, and I was a little heated about it, and it was spinning me out all day. So finally, I have a whiteboard in my office. I just stood up and I just fourth stepped it real quick. I'm writing everything, and somebody comes in my office, and I'm all, never mind what's up on the board. No, I didn't do that, but looking at that, and the fourth step, it is huge. But I had to come to that place that I had to take that moment to put all that stuff aside and look at what's my responsibility for this. What's my responsibility? And now I'm going to have to go back and make amends for my part of the situation, no matter how big or small it may be. During this process, once again, don't ask them to forgive you. When we ask them to forgive us, hey, will you forgive me for? We're once again placing our stuff on their side of the street. We are simply apologizing and saying, I'm sorry for this. We're now going to let God deal with them, the Holy Spirit deal with them, to come to forgiveness on their own terms when their time is right. And for some, they go right away and they go, oh man, I totally forgive you. For others, they may go, I'm not ready to forgive you yet. And that's okay. But when we say, will you forgive me? We set them up to deal with the stuff we just shoved on their side of the street. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And that's a pet peeve of mine, and I try not to teach my kids that. I'm struggling with that, but it's a bummer sometimes. But here's the deal. We go humbly. No matter when, where, how you do this step, always go humbly. Don't walk into it all prideful and boastful and I'm better than you and look at all this stuff. No, it's simply go in humbly. Hey, you're humbling yourself. You're making amends for your part of this situation. Don't expect anything in return. If you expect something in return, you're set up for resentment. You're set up for failure. You're going to walk away with more stuff. Luke 6:35 says this, but love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. That's a great principle. It's a great principle. The fact that we would do stuff without expecting anything back. That we would extend an amends to them and walk away and be okay with it. I remember in Alaska when I went before the elder board and I said, hey, I'm really sorry for the fact that I've been looking at pornography and I shouldn't have been doing that. And then I was like expecting them to say, Scott, we totally forgive you. And here's what they said. They said, we hope wherever you're going, you get help. And I was like, that is not what I wanted. You're all jerks. But I said that on the inside, but I walked out and I was like, and here's the thing, they didn't know I was moving to Modesto where Celebrate Recovery was. What? They prayed for me and here's what happened, man. That's crazy. But here's the deal. If you walk out of there and you have that expectation and then that resentment sets in, because what we like to do is we like to hold on to bitterness and resentment, and that bitterness and that resentment and that revenge will only set us up for the 3 Ds, which is depression, despair, and discouragement. And if you keep holding on to that bitterness and that resentment, you know, that person that you wish was dead, that would actually, the world would be better if they were no longer on it person. And if you're still holding on to that mentality, you're going to be set up for depression, despair, and discouragement. And it's not going to be good. That takes us to the next aspect of this, which is do it at the right time. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 says this, there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven. There's a time for everything. In the middle of Thanksgiving dinner is not the right time to make an amends. Right? We can all agree to that, right? When you're going for that one big family gathering, don't do it then. But timing is everything. You guys got to know when the right time is. And there was a sponsor of mine that I love that I would say, hey, we need to really process through this. We need to look through this. I want you to write out the amends. And then we'll talk about when we're going to give it. And I'm like, all right, I'll meet you next week. And I'd come back the next week and he's all, hey, I just made an amends. What? We haven't even talked about it. What are you talking about? Do it the right way. Meet with your sponsor. Go through that process. That way you know you're doing it right. Because on some of these, you only get one shot at it. You only get one shot at making this amends. Pray for guidance and direction through this process. This whole process is, God, how do I know it's the right time? For guys, and this happens every time. It's a big pet peeve of mine in the church. The church in a whole, not Big Valley Grace, the church as a whole, is we have these great speakers that come in and talk about sex addiction or pornography and all this kind of stuff, and they're great. But then the guilt and the shame falls into the lives of the men, and they go home from that, and they go to their wife, and they go, hey, I've been looking at porn. And that's great that you're confessing it, but you didn't go through the process, and what you did right there is you just like jacked up your wife, and you just hit her with a sledgehammer, and yes, she wants to know that, but there's a time and a place to be able to share that in an appropriate way. And then the guy's like, oh, I feel amazing. And unfortunately, I know there's women in this room that have received that kind of news, and it's devastated their lives. And there's a right time and a right place, and so we have to pray for guidance, and we have to pray for direction through this process. Philippians chapter 2, verse 4 says this, each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. That we would not be selfish in how we go about this. Yes, it is about us, it's not about them, but our timing needs to be into consideration of the other people. When is the right time? Don't wait until you feel like it. Don't be lazy in your recovery. Don't throw out those excuses. Talk about it with your sponsor. Lay it out with your sponsor. Have that conversation. And remember, he's your sponsor or she's your sponsor for a reason. And they may have a little wisdom, and so listen to your sponsor. Who do you make amends to on your list? That's for you and your sponsor to decide and to talk about. But it may not be your ex-girlfriends. It may not be those exes that you've had those relationships with, because that may stir up and cause deeper emotions that you don't really want to do. And so we deal with those maybe in the letter format. We don't deal with those in a face-to-face thing. But then when we're able to start doing that, we're able to start living the promises of recovery. And Scott Miller, 2 weeks ago, read the promises out of the AA book. Many of us know that. But we start to live those promises. And Joel chapter 2, verse 25 says, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. What have the locusts eaten in your life? Have they eaten your marriage? The Lord will restore your marriage. If you do the work of recovery, you continue to apply the word of God to your life. I know for a season it is hell, but in the other side of it, it will be amazing. I know because it's true in my life. And I know it can be true in your life. God will restore the children that you've caused harm and damage to. He will bring them back to you. He will bring a relationship when needed. What about the friendships that you've damaged? What about the job you've destroyed? What about the joy that's been robbed and sucked out of your life? He will restore it. He will bring you joy. What about the respect you've lost? He will restore that respect. Because you will become a man, a woman of good character when you apply these steps to your life. He will restore intimacy. I know for many of those who struggle with the sex addiction or are married to a sex addict, he will restore emotional, spiritual, and physical intimacy back into that marriage as you apply these things to your life. He will restore your eyes. For many, you walk down, and I've sat in airports and I've sat in malls and I've watched the people around me as they do the elevator with everybody walking by, checking out floor to floor to floor to floor to floor of everybody that walks by. He will restore your eyes so when you talk to somebody, you actually look at them in the eyeballs. We got to admit the hurt and the harm. We got to make our list. We got to encourage one another. It's not for them. Do it at the right time and start living the promises of recovery. Will you guys stand and close our time with the serenity prayer with me? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen.